million project turned into $8 million, because as you looked into more details of what it took, then the HVAC system came up, the asbestos came up. I mean, I'm sure there might be some hidden treasure down there, or something from, I don't even want to say what's underground as you dig deep. But, we have it. We have the funds there. I would really love to see, and I know this has been talked about for decades, but and we've actually talked about it more recently when we did the lobby, which was what is the long-term plan for that building? Because if we keep putting in millions of dollars in piecemeal development, are we really going to spend much more money on that building than if we looked at something in a big picture way? So, or what if we even try to relocate, which I really doubt we can do unless we went for a go bond, and this isn't the time to do that per se. I don't know, but. So in terms of so let me just cut to the chase. In terms of the recommendation, that's fine to keep it there, but what I would like to see still is what is the long-term plan for that building? Because even with all the changes that are listed here for that particular project, you still don't have a police headquarters that is up to date, that meets the needs of the people who work there day in and day out, and with the equipment that they need. There are pieces of it that will be improved, but not everything. And I think we looked at that with for example, the fire station remodel. That's what we did. We looked at that building. We looked at, can an EOC go there? We're looking at the muffler shop. We're looking much more broad picture, and this $8 million price tag is just one piece of a bigger whole. I did ask Mr. Pearson earlier that looking at that bigger picture also looks at how much general fund money we're spending on leasing the annex, which I think is about $200,000 a year. So, in terms of financing these kind of things, to remember that let's say we were able to buy out another piece of property or something, over time that could be a cost savings in the general fund that you can't use RDA funds to pay for general rent. So I'm fine with that, but I want to have that bigger conversation of is it absolutely no way, no how, you can never change that building at all, or is this the best we can do, or what is it in it for us in the future? But certainly those locker rooms are woefully inadequate, have been for way too long, and for the reasons that have been expressed before, we need to fix them. And then finally, on the future sites. Actually, no, one more question. The Helena parking lot. Are we considering that like a community grant to the Children's Museum? I mean, we're going to count that as, we have to do it because of remediation, but if it's going to be used, if we're going to tie it into the parking mediation with the Children's Museum, in some ways that's like giving the Children's Museum significant funding to enable their project to move forward.
Member Schneider, I don't think we thought of it as a community grant to the Children's Museum. We thought of it as what it was originally proposed to be, which was an expansion of parking in the waterfront. Okay. But we did want to point out to you that it would have the ancillary benefit of perhaps providing adjacent parking for the public that would be going to the Children's Museum. I might also just give you an update in our discussions with the Children's Museum. Their position remains that they would like to rent or lease the redevelopment agency property at a nominal rate, but they assure us that they're not going to ask for any development funding.
Okay, but in order for them to get the project the way they need to mitigate the parking, and the availability of the Helena Street lot will allow the project to move forward.
The formal parking analysis has not been done. It's just our concern that it may be
possible.
Problematical.
Okay, so I would just say it's fine to list it the way it is today for this particular purpose, but as we move forward, if that's something that needs to be linked somehow, that we acknowledge that, what it's there for. And then future capital projects. Two items I think go way up. The ones you mentioned as high priorities, I agree. Comments on two of them, the carousel and the bathhouse, Cabrillo bathhouse. I think these two projects in particular are great opportunities to work with the Park Foundation on maybe a matching fundraising campaign, especially the carousel. If there's a way that we can enlist the community through the Park Foundation to raise $400,000 and we put the other $350,000 or whatever the combination is, that might be one way to invigorate the Park Foundation. I know that was a recommendation from the Capital Infrastructure Financing Task Force to work, create those public-private partnerships. It's a fun project, and it's not as big as some of these other ones that could be doable. And the bathhouse might be another one like that. And that helps us deal with the nexus of it's not quite in the RDA zone, but it is city-owned property. If that's so instead of just saying let's just make that RDA projects, I'd like to explore that. And there may be others in here, but those two in particular stuck out at me. And then finally on Library Plaza, I think actually should be way towards the top of the list, especially with Jardín de las Granadas across the street. The lower Milpas improvements, just to reiterate, it's not just about lighting and sidewalks. One of the other potentials there is the restroom at the Cabrillo ballparks. It's a public safety issue. It's dealing with an enforcement issue around in that area that can also enhance the ballparks there. So even though that's still pie in the sky in the future, kind of thinking about it, I just want to reiterate that that's part of what I was thinking about for the lower Milpas. But I really think what you have in front of you is a great recommendation. So I hope my comments just say what happens if we have extra money here or less money here, where it should go. Thank you.
And if I could, on the future projects, of course, we're not necessarily saying that you would want to plug these into the existing capital program, but that's a good list to begin with for future years' capital projects as annual funding comes along.
I think you've done as usual, a really top-notch job, and you've got some things on here that Ms. Falcone and I wanted on here back in year number 1 of our tenure. So who's to knock it? So I guess I would take a little bit more of maybe a fiscal policy look at this thing. I don't have any basic problem with the list. I do think that there's a number of items on the funded projects in process list which are quite questionable at this point. And I don't mean questionable in the sense that they're bad, but that the future depends on a whole lot of things which we have little, if anything, any control over. So I come by being a budget person from a lot of years, and I'm concerned that this economy situation that we're in is going to spin on down rather than bottoming out. And so I think that we have to really be careful here and conserve and prioritize these things in terms of timing, and the ones that may be great projects, but they're just not quite hatched yet. I don't know that we can really do much with that. I guess for the next few months now, I would prefer that we err on the side of caution with our expenditures, and I don't know that I need to illuminate those right now, because I think we all have, but there's a good half dozen or so on here that may or may not happen. Certainly, I have no problem whatsoever with the police locker rooms. I think that needs to be done. So I'm saying that the ones where we have to work with other agencies, we're not sure where their position is. I think that thing just has to go into kind of a second priority. Now, as to the potential projects, some of these are really pretty good. I really kind of wish they were higher up. I too think that the Library Plaza is one. I am not sure I agree with Ms. Falcone on the fire station number 1. That's the kind of thing where I'd really need some more fiscal data. When we're in there with all of our crews, does it make more sense to go ahead and do this kind of thing than to go back? I don't know the answer to that, but I would like to know the answer to that. I'm not expecting you to have the answer to that. I think Ms. Snyder is absolutely right in the park board, which Ia and I are both on. They're in the process of refocusing their direction right now and trying to get provide more support to the city. And this the carousel is a perfect example for a public-private partnership. Times right now maybe not the best for public-private partnerships. But even in bad times, there's always people around who are willing to support. So for me, then, I like the basic framework. I think we need to structure anything that isn't pretty much a go has to kind of drop into a second priority. And I would like to see the items on the potential future projects list. Some of these, I think, are very good. And I guess what I'm saying is some of the projects that I pointed out are uncertain because of things that are not in the control of the city. These may be more certain and more in the control of the city, and I'm not so sure about why we shouldn't move some of these over to this list, because these are areas where we may control the entire project or most of it, and therefore maybe make more sense to give those a little bit higher priority. I unfortunately agree with the community grant position that you've recommended, and hate that, but that's the way we have to go. So that's it for me. What else did you need today?
If you're feeling comfortable, and perhaps you are based on the conversation I've heard, we would be looking for you to support the staff recommendation, and that's really the staff recommendation column up there. And those projects you talk about, the future projects, we'll be doing full analysis to the degree we can of all those and bringing it back to you in the fiscal year 2010 capital projects process.
So I could try a motion to recommend to the full council the staff recommendation as presented. I would like to add a few recommendations from the committee, see if my colleagues are okay with it. Excuse me. One is to clean up the budgeting piece, the extra completed projects, and whatever funds are left over, we add to the contingency account. And again, I guess the community grants piece of it, if for some reason the ERAF shift is much less than we anticipate, that we relook at that option. But not to say that it's going to happen, but if it does, I'd like to include in the motion a trigger to look at that as a possibility.
Is there a second?
There is a second with just a little comment. I'm willing to support the staff recommendation and the two suggestions by Ms. Schneider. The one that gives me pause will come as no surprise, and that's the additional 1.4 for De La Guerra Plaza. If the Just Fix-Its can come in under this proposed amount, because we've allocated 2.2, you want 1.4 in addition for 3.6, you know. 2.2 total. Current project estimate. So sorry. Anyway, there's a 1.4 additional being recommended to be added. Okay, so if we can do it for the Just Do It for as little as possible without any, fluff and fodder, then that's what I'm going to be, looking for in the design and all of that sort of thing. So I'll go with the recommendation as it exists right now, but believe me when I say writing herd on this is going to be one of my top priorities. So.
Mr. Chair, Member Falcone, if I just add for your information, we are expecting to come back with those two alternatives from the subcommittee to the full board sometime in January, and you'll be able to look then at the nature of those improvements.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Fine.
Then you have a full second on my...
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Before I adjourn, I wanted to ask if there was any public comment at this meeting, which we are required to do. And Mr. Pearson, is that what you were waving at me at? Okay. So I'm looking for public comment. Don't see any. If not, then meeting adjourned.